I sometimes wonder if we really truly grasp the sheer scale of wealth that exists, well, within certain circles here in Malaysia, especially when you set it against the everyday struggles that, let's be honest, most of us face. It feels like almost daily, doesn't it? We hear about the rising cost of living, the economic pressures squeezing ordinary families. Just making ends meet is a constant challenge. But then a story like this drops. Something so audacious, really, in its implications. It
Yeah.
makes you stop, makes you pause and genuinely question what you thought you knew about money, power, and the rhetoric that surrounds them in our country. I mean, imagine this, a single family, and not just any family, but one tied intimately to the highest levels of Malaysian politics for decades, reports a robbery. And the value of what was stolen, staggering, RM 1.8 million
Yeah.
ringgit, and what they described as old jewelry and personal effects. Just think about that sum. For so many Malaysians, that's not just a distant dream, it's a lifetime of savings, maybe several lifetimes. So this wasn't just a crime report, was it? It instantly became this powerful, unexpected symbol. It injected itself right into the heart of our ongoing national conversations about wealth disparity, about economic policy. It really forces us to ask, what does this tell us about the true economic landscape here?
Right. And to ground that discussion, maybe let's just quickly recap the actual facts of the incident itself. Because as you said, it moved beyond a simple police report very quickly. So the break-in happened at a house in Bukit Ledang, Damansara. It was identified as the home of a grandchild of former Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Apparently the property itself is registered under Mizan Mahathir, though reports said only the domestic workers were actually there when the crime occurred. The theft involved, as you mentioned, roughly 1.8 million ringgit. And the description used was old jewelry and personal effects. It was discovered by a domestic helper around 3 p.m. on Wednesday, July 26, 2025. Now, the acting Kuala Lumpur police chief, Datuk Mohamad Usufyan, he confirmed it pretty quickly. Said a full investigation is underway. They're doing the usual things, meticulously reviewing CCTV footage, using forensic methods to look for leads. We also know that 3 people, a security guard and a housekeeper included, have been questioned about it. But important point, as of now, no arrests have actually been made, and the police have also publicly stated they aren't ruling out insider involvement.
They've asked the public not to speculate while the investigation goes on. So those are the basic facts. But they became the stage, didn't they, for this much larger debate?
Exactly. And this is where I think for many people, the story starts to get really interesting and frankly, a bit unsettling. When you first hear RM 1.8 million in jewelry stolen, okay, your first thought might just be about the crime itself, how audacious. But then you realize whose family it is. Connected to a former PM, a central figure in Malaysian politics for what, over half a century? Suddenly the whole narrative shifts, doesn't it? For most of us, 1.8 million ringgit. It's not just a number, it represents a financial reality that feels almost, well, mythical. Think about what that could do. How many homes could be built? How many small businesses launched? How many families struggling right now could have their future secured by even a fraction of that? Yet in this context, it gets described as old jewelry and personal effects. That phrasing itself, it sort of implies it's just a part of a much larger fortune, maybe one we can't even imagine. And that stark contrast, that's what immediately pushed this beyond just a crime story. It lit up conversations everywhere. Intense public scrutiny followed, it felt like a window suddenly opened into a reality many hadn't seen, changing perceptions about wealth in certain political circles.
Yeah, what's fascinating is how seamlessly this incident just plugged right into the bigger political picture happening at that exact moment. The timing was quite remarkable, actually. This news broke right around the same time the Turun Anwar rally, the anti-Anwar rally, was taking place. And at that rally, you had prominent opposition figures, people like Tun Dr. Mahathir, Mohamad himself, and Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, being very outspoken, criticizing the current government, especially Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Tun Mahathir, in particular, has been very consistent with this line, hasn't he? Frequently accusing Anwar Ibrahim of, quote, betraying the country, and more specifically arguing that the Prime Minister hasn't done enough to support or uplift the Malay community. His rhetoric often emphasizes the economic struggles, the poverty that he says a significant portion of the Malay population faces. So the timing then raises this really profound question, doesn't it? You have this atmosphere where a former leader is passionately talking about the financial hardship and poverty of many Malays, and then, boom, news breaks about this kind of substantial personal wealth within his own immediate family. How does that land? How does
Yeah.
it resonate with those criticisms he's making? It creates this powerful dissonance. It's hard to ignore.
Which brings us right to the core paradox, I think. The thing many Malaysians are really grappling with now. On one side, you have this towering figure in our politics, someone who led the country for decades, repeatedly and very strongly highlighting the difficulties faced by the Malay community, emphasizing how many are truly poor, struggling even for basics like food, shelter, painting a picture of a community needing serious upliftment. Okay, that's one side. Then on the other hand, this public revelation, RM 1.8 million in old jewelry within his own immediate family, that represents a level of personal wealth that's just, it's unimaginable for the vast majority of the very people he says he's championing. And we can't ignore the backdrop here either, can we? The new economic policy. It's been around for over 50 years. A huge socioeconomic program meant to restructure society, eradicate poverty, boost Malay economic participation, and crucially, Tun Mahathir himself oversaw its implementation for more than 2 decades of that time. So this incident, it really forces you to ask some hard questions. If a policy designed to tackle economic disparity has been active for so long, and yet you see this kind of personal wealth revealed right alongside the persistent poverty being discussed by the same political figures, what does that actually tell us about how effective those policies have been? Or maybe about their unintended consequences. What do you make of that contrast? It's pretty stark.
It is stark. And if we broaden the lens a bit, connect this to the wider story of Malaysia's economic development. It definitely pushes for a rethink of how we talk about poverty and progress. Historically, some of the discussion around Malay poverty has sometimes, unfortunately, shifted blame outwards, occasionally pointing fingers at other communities like Chinese Malaysians, for example, for economic gaps. But an incident like this one, involving a family so deeply connected to a prominent Malay political figure, it forces the conversation inwards, doesn't it? It kind of redirects the focus away from blaming others and towards some pretty sharp questions about internal factors. Questions about leadership accountability, about how policies were actually implemented on the ground, and critically, about how wealth has actually been distributed within the community itself, especially among the elite. For a lot of people watching this, the event, as unfortunate as it is for the family involved, has acted as a kind of revealing moment, potentially highlighting inconsistencies in the rhetoric used by political figures who claim to be the sole protectors of one community. It really compels a much more critical look, maybe an uncomfortable one, at whether the political messages truly line up with the complex economic realities people are actually living.
Yeah, and that's where this whole thing just becomes so much more than a police report, doesn't it? It's like this unexpected mirror reflecting some of the most sensitive, most crucial questions Malaysia is facing right now. This robbery, in this really unforeseen way, it shifted the national conversation. It's not just about the crime anymore. It's about the profound ripple effects it has on how we understand economic disparity, political accountability, right at the top. That number, RM 1.8 million in old jewelry, it's stopped being just a detail in an investigation.
Okay.
It's become this potent symbol, hasn't it? It's a number that's resonated across the country, sparking this significant, often uneasy societal discussion. It puts wealth and poverty and the responsibilities of our leaders into this really sharp, almost unforgiving focus. It's a contrast you just can't ignore, the public talk from political stages versus these sometimes startling private economic realities. And of course, let's not forget the police investigation is still going. They're still diligently reviewing CCTV, gathering forensic evidence. 3 people questioned, yes, but no arrests yet. That just adds another layer, doesn't it? More anticipation, more unanswered questions, keeping this whole thing firmly in the public eye.
Absolutely. And expanding on that from an analytical view, this whole situation really throws light on the mechanisms, often quite opaque mechanisms, of how wealth can accumulate within politically connected families, especially in a country like Malaysia, with policies like the new economic policy. Now, the stated goal of the NEP was always broad upliftment for the Malay community. That was the idea. But a key question that's lingered for decades is whether, in practice, it might have inadvertently created pathways for a select few, those within the political and economic elite, to gather disproportionate wealth. This incident, regardless of how that wealth is actually obtained, it brings that long simmering question right out into the public square, very visibly. It forces a conversation not just about how wealth is made, but also how it's perceived by a population that's dealing with inflation, dealing with wages that feel stagnant. So the contrast isn't just numbers on a page. It's about potential erosion of public trust. Especially when you have political narratives talking about widespread struggle existing side by side, with these very visible signs of immense, perhaps inherited wealth within the families of the people telling those stories. It challenges the standard narrative of economic progress, asks if the benefits of development have really trickled down fairly, or have they maybe become concentrated at the very top. This robbery, in a way, it provides a sort of real-world data point for a debate that's been largely theoretical for a long time.
So as we kind of wrap up this really quite intriguing discussion, we're left with this incredibly powerful image, aren't we? This juxtaposition that demands some real reflection. On one side, you've got the constant political talk, emphasizing national struggles, economic hardship, the poverty many Malaysians face every day. And on the other side, this stark, very public glimpse of immense personal wealth right inside a family, deeply woven into our political fabric. It really forces us, I think, to look beyond the headlines, beyond the official statements, to really think about the underlying economic truths and what they mean structurally. This isn't just about one robbery, is it? Or one family's bad luck. It's about how an event like this can accidentally shine a light on the complex, sometimes uncomfortable, realities of wealth, power, and how prosperity is shared or not shared in our nation.
And it raises what feels like an unavoidable question, really, for all of us as Malaysians. What are the fundamental things driving economic disparity in our country? And maybe even more importantly, how do we, as a society, genuinely face up to and start working towards closing these huge gaps, especially when you see such visible, immense wealth existing right alongside the kind of pervasive poverty that gets talked about so much in our political debates? It makes you reevaluate if the solutions we've been trying are actually reaching the people who need the most, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Ultimately, this story, it's become much more than just a crime report. It's an unexpected catalyst, really, pushing us to examine those deeper truths about wealth, power, and prosperity here. It's an invitation, maybe, to consider how this single incident lights up the broader picture of Malaysia's economy and leadership accountability. So, what does it all mean for Malaysia's future? And perhaps more personally, how does it shape your view on the path forward for our country?